So this video is probably a lot less complicated than people actually think it is, and that's why it's really that short. Okay, so right now we're kind of like in a recession slash potential. Are we actually going to go into a depression of sorts? Okay, because we've been in a recession for a while, although we might not want to call it that. And now we're seeing, for example, banks like SBV, they're actually struggling, to the point where some banks are actually having to bot out, and then some banks are actually just kind of in a way collapsing some sort. So for the average individual, what exactly are you supposed to be doing right now? Should you keep your money in a bank? Should you put your money under your mattress? Where exactly should you be keeping your money? And as far as, for example, your investments, or what can you do personally to actually try to protect yourself? Now, by the way, there is one rule that I follow when it comes to money, and that one rule is I only worry about the things I have control over. So as far as, for example, federal rates and banks failing and so on, I really don't have control over any of that stuff. But what I do have control over is exactly what do I do with my money, and where do I actually put my money, and what do I put my money into. I mean, those are the real things I can actually have control over. And how are my personal finances actually doing? Okay, so first of all, as always, guys, like this video on top, I also subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified. Now, the very first thing, guys, is as I understand it, okay, SBV, Silicon Valley Bank, what they were basically doing was they had a lot of people's money and they basically invested that money into treasury bills, okay, or bonds overall. Now, whenever they actually did that and then interest rates were raised, obviously, if you have an investment that gets you paid, for example, 5%, and now you have, for example, different rates at 8% or 7%, then obviously your investments become less valuable. And whenever people start to pull their money and they want their money back, guess what happens, okay? You have to sell off your investments for less than they're worth, and actually sold them off around $1.8 billion loss. Now that obviously means that they could not meet all the requirements as far as, for example, people want to take the money out and they could not actually give people their money. Now you might be asking me, Tommy, how do you break this down in a more simple way? The answer is, if I'm a bank and you're a depositor, you give me $100, I grab the $100, I invest it into an investment, that investment loses money, now you want your money back, I can't give you your money back, and now we have a problem. It's that simple. It's not that complicated. Now the big thing is, because banks are so intertwined when it comes to meeting the reserves and so on, you could have one bank fail that leads to another bank failing, and then you have a whole little problem actually going on, okay? Economy can collapse, or we could go into recession slash depression officially. Now, as far as, for example, Tommy, all right, this is kind of crazy, but what can I actually do here? Well, the first thing is, okay, for the average person, most people don't really have these issues, because FDIC insurance actually covers you up to $250,000, and the average American doesn't even have $1,000. I'm just being honest here, okay? So for the average person, this is not even a real issue. For people that were actually depositors at SBV Bank, these people actually had around 93% of them, if I'm not mistaken, had over that 250K limit. So if you do have that issue where you have a lot of money and you're trying to figure out where to deposit it, you could always spread your money across different banks to help you do that. For example, you can have money in Chase, BOA, online banks, and so on, and you can get covered up to $250,000 across all of those different banks. This way you actually have your money spread around, okay? Or you could just be invested directly into tips like treasury inflation protected bonds or whatever, or securities, and you could just put your money, for example, into short-term bonds and so on, okay? It's another way to have your money kind of like protected if you have, for example, a bunch of money. But again, for the average person, it's actually not a real issue, because average person does not have that much money. But for people that have that much money, they usually follows by having investments and so on, and having their money spread around different places. So I doubt that's all those people's money in that one place. And it's not like it's a good thing or whatever, but it's like, you don't want to keep your money in one place, obviously. That would not be a good idea. Now, as far as, for example, if you are an individual, and although you might not have this issue, what can you do personally to make sure that you don't have to worry about these things? Well, overall, you don't have to worry about a bank failing potentially, because the Fed is involved and we are covered up to $250,000. But you do have to worry about, for example, if it does cause, for example, a steep recession or that leads into a depression, because at that point we could have, for example, job loss, and things can go out of whack at that point, and that's not what you want. So the best thing you can probably do is make sure your finances are in order. Make sure you don't have, for example, high interest debt during this time. For example, credit cards or any debt overall, I would just try to eliminate them. So when you don't have that friction in your life anymore, you have less to demand on your cash flow and less demand to have to keep working a job that you don't even like in the first place. Number two is you want to make sure you actually have an emergency account. This way, if something were to happen and we do go into a depression and it takes you a while to find a job, well, at least you can actually find a job within 3 months or 6 months without having to worry about not meeting your bills every single month. Okay, so an emergency fund that covers 3 months or 6 months of your actual necessities. Okay, necessities are shelter, utilities, groceries, and transportation. Everything outside of that is usually just a want, so it doesn't have to cover your Netflix bill or anything like that. You can just cut those things out when times get really hard. Number three is make sure you're investing. So 10-20% of your money invested. For example, me personally, I put it into the S&P 500. This gives me passive income, so this way I'm covered. And whenever you buy a home, make sure it's no more than a third of your monthly income net on a 15-year mortgage. This way your goal is to actually pay it off. And this way, even if you have a job loss, it's not like it's half your money being put towards your mortgage, but more like just a third. So you're able to actually just find another job in the meantime to be able to keep up with all your bills. Okay, so the less demands you have on yourself, the best you're actually going to be when we have, for example, times of uncertainty when it comes to the economy. Those are the only things you can control in a sense, which is basically yourself. But you can't control because we printed a bunch of money as a country, so even though you have more money in a sense, it's like worth less. Okay, so it's like this false reality where you bought a house for 150, now the house is worth like 170. You're like, I'm making some money. No, money is not worth what it was worth when you actually bought that house. The buying power has changed. That's the idea, and that's a scary idea. Okay, so the less demands, the less debt you have. If you have no debt, even better, the better off you're going to be, because if something does happen, you're basically cushioned. Okay, if you lose your job, you have unemployment, that money comes in, you can get some other job to meet your demands and so on, but you're not struggling to the point where you're living paycheck to paycheck, and if anything goes wrong, you're going to be messed up and sauced over. So the point is, SPV Bank, Silicon Valley Bank, I keep saying SBV and it's SVB. I just get confused, I'm sorry. But overall, these things, we can't control them. So I rarely, if ever, pay any attention to these things. I rarely, if ever, pay attention to the big point when the economy comes, because in reality, all you can control is yourself. And whenever you're investing into the stock market, the best thing to do is continue investing, because the market has ups, it has downs, the economy has cycles. And once you understand that, that keeps you in the game for longer. Once you're not investing all of your money and you actually have less expenses, that keeps you more balanced. You know, the people that are really scared are the people that have all their money in one bank, or the people that have all their money in one investments, and that's not what you want to do. Okay, you want to be a little bit smarter than that, and you want to shoot for financial independence. Now guys, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. It's a simple one, short one, because it really is that simple. You don't have to panic, and if you are panicking, the answer is it should motivate you to kind of just like get out of debt, invest into emergency fund, okay, and then start investing in the stock market. You know, buy a home you can afford and so on. And it could push you to potentially say, I can't do any of this stuff where I live right now. Well, potentially look at other places where you could actually live and where you could actually make these things happen. Okay, as always guys, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified. Up here is another video, and I'll probably make an update video potentially if these things do get worse, but on average these are very basic videos, and it's like I make them because I want to make sure you guys aren't worried. But remember, you don't have to worry about things you can't control, because in the end you just can't control them. Okay, thanks for watching guys. Peace out.